Okay, thank you so much. So let's get to what some very innovative companies, and even more importantly, the brilliant minds behind them in industry, are thinking about, what they're doing, where they found success. And I just think there's nothing more powerful than understanding the leaders in industry. What are they doing? How are they thinking about it? Let's take some of those and merge those into what's going on. So I'm just so happy here to introduce, so we've got Andy Park all the way at the end from Kabam. We've got Anatoly from Game Insight. Thank you, who's flown all the way in from Europe. And we've got Brian Sapp here, who's managed to get up from LA with rain in California. That's a near impossibility, so thank you. And so what I'd like you to introduce yourselves, your role at your company real quick, and also in your company as well. And then just to get to know you a little bit, was there some defining thing that happened in the gaming side, either long ago or more recently, where you feel it's just really hit you big? And for me, that point was Legend of Zelda in 1986. It's just like life-changing, magic, monsters. This is the world I wanted to live in. But we're here. So let's go just one by one. Introduce yourselves, please. We'll start with Brian.
Sure, yeah. My name's Brian Sapp. I'm the Vice President of UA Marketing and Ads at Jam City. It's a casual gaming company based in LA. Let's see, game that influenced me. I'm going to go with Valve's Portal. And the reason that is I was kind of a hardcore console player, and it's a console game. But what I thought that game did really well is it made me realize that I could be into puzzle games. And it felt like a mobile game because the levels were super short. And to me, it was like a good transition for me moving from console into mobile. So I think I'll go with that.
I didn't see you as a puzzle person. That's
yeah, well, you
good
work
to
at a
know.
puzzle gaming company, you got to get into it.
All right, Anatoly, tell me, because you have a very interesting history.
Oh, yeah. My name is Anatoly, and we started almost a decade ago by building one of the first simulation tycoon games for mobile. And the inspiration behind that was actually games like Transfer Tycoon by Chris Sawyer and SimCity. And nowadays, we make even first-person shooter games for mobile, like Guns of Boom. And the big inspiration for that was like 20-plus hours a day playing Quake 2 and Quake 2 CDF. So,
and professionally, by the way, he played that for a while. So there's the inspiration behind a game like Guns of Boom, which is a very, very fun game. Oh,
sure. Hi, my name is Andy Park. I'm the Director of User Acquisition at Kabam. Kabam makes massive multiplayer mobile games. Our top hits include Marvel Contest of Champions and Transformers Forged to Fight. Download them too. My favorite game that really struck me when I was growing up was Command & Conquer. The real-time strategy, and then moving over to StarCraft. I'm Korean, but I was terrible at StarCraft. I don't know how that worked out, but I really enjoyed it when I was a kid. And then World of Warcraft. I'm pretty sure everyone has had their run-in with WoW.
That's great. Well, I'm happy to hear these things. This brings back a lot of nostalgia as the years have gone by. Okay, so we're going to talk about two major areas. One on the user acquisition side. How do we get the users into our game? So we want to hear what they're doing there. And then we'll talk about the monetization side. Secondly, how do we make money in those games? And just a lot of the detail, and maybe a little bit about the future if we have some time. So let's go ahead and start on the bidding side, finding these users. So bidding strategies. Let's talk bidding. Like what have you found works, doesn't work? Where are you going with this? And Brian, why don't you start off?
Okay.
And jump in, please, if you're hearing these things, please.
Yeah. So, and I think I probably speak for a lot of us, but most of our campaigns at this point, 80% plus, are app event optimization. That's where we're finding app event optimization. That's where we're finding most of our success. The exception to that is at game launch, especially with intellectual property. So we launched Harry Potter last year, and I was at WB Games before that. I launched a lot of IP games, and typically at launch, bidding on CPI works until it doesn't, and then you really need those later funnel metrics to pass back to the platforms, and then that becomes your bidding strategy. And what we've seen is that, once a game ages, and that's not heavily ad supported, so predominantly IAP supported, when you start bidding on MAI or app install, typically you see very little return there. So it almost feels like the big platforms have almost siphoned off the payers. I mean, like, okay, if you want those payers, you have to use app event optimization as your strategy. And so it does feel like, in terms of what's available to us as UA buyers, is that if you're looking for return on ad spend, it is event optimization.
And the event, just to be explicit here, is the event the spend, or is it something else?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the genre. Definitely purchase event is by far the most successful event you can pass back. However, certain genres, and we have a couple of these genres in our catalog, are very slow to monetize in terms of when the player monetizes, and most of these windows are 7 days at most. So we are constantly searching for other events to pass back as a signal for the platforms. But what I think, and this is kind of a bigger thing, but what I think is happening is that I think product teams really have to think about moving those purchase events without sacrificing LTV up earlier, because UA is becoming so critical to scaling a product, and app event optimization is basically the leveling the playing field between all UA teams. Prior to that, good UA teams could succeed on their own, but now anybody can basically run app event optimization. So I think product teams really need to think about that and build these, I don't know if it's a purchase event, but build certain events into the product so early signals can be passed back to the platforms.
Yeah, and try to move that LTV a little sooner.
Maybe.
Does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, and what else? Bidding?
Yeah, sure. When it comes to bidding, there's a few things that my team likes to look at to be able to evaluate any potential optimizations. It really starts with the budget. Are we filling the budget at the current bids? That's an indicator. I can probably reduce my bids and still get more efficient costs at that point. What is my CPM backing out to? Do I need to increase my bid to be able to be more competitive, to get my ad shown? And those are really the core kind of fundamentals that we like to look at just to evaluate how do we move the bid up and down by about 10 or 20%. But as it relates to UAC, exactly what Brian said, we're going for the actions, but you don't want to sacrifice that $1 in sacrifice of $100 a year from now, for instance.
And how often? Is this a daily thing? Is it a weekly?
Yeah.
When's enough data where you...
I think it's a function of how much you're spending and at the same time how your creatives are converting over time. If your creative conversion rates are declining over time, that's an easy indicator that you need to make some changes over there. But depending on how much you spend and how many impressions are really going out, I can't really give an exact number, but that's what I would be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our findings are pretty much the same. You have to optimize your creatives once you start seeing major spikes in the CPI costs. But in terms of the events, I think it's also a recurring exercise to revisit the product and see how every quarter you could discover more events on the BI side and figure out whether you could optimize for something else. Just like even if you found the perfect event, don't stick to that, keep exploring, and you might find something else that might be your new growth strategy. So that's one of the tips that I could give. But for different games with different monetization strategies, we use different optimizations. Obviously, purchase is a strong indication for some of the heavy in-app games, but some of our more ad-driven games, we would optimize either for the number of watched ads or something like that. That we could find in the first few days. And then again, you had a great point that if you have a game that has really long tail monetization, try to add more events, try to discover more of those events to optimize for. This will significantly improve your US strategy.
Got it. And so about the creatives, do creatives matter? Like, do these ads? Do you see a difference in high-performing creatives, low-performing? Any tips here?
Yeah, usually if you see something that's really working well, it'll stand out. And especially when you work with Google or your other ad networks and your partners, their ad serving is designed to be able to serve the best performing creative. And so if you're A/B testing different variants, it can be pretty easy to tell the clear winner. Of course, there are times when you get mixed results and you need to test again.
And I always wonder here, because there's science and there's art. Like, do you just know a good creative when you see one, or do you really have to look at the data and say, wow, the world does not think like I would have thought on this one?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I've seen creatives where I'm like, wow, that's so amazing, but it bombs. I'm like, oh, well.
I think if I always tell this to, because okay, you probably get this. Like I work with a lot of studios, and typically a lot of people have an idea of what creative works, right? Because you think like American Express ads look great, Coke ads look great. And then you get to performance marketing, and if you ever want your ego crushed, just make bets on what you think is going to perform, and then look at the data, and then try to figure out why that didn't perform, and the thing that you thought was going to suck, why that performed. And it's almost like you have to re-educate a lot of people who want to get involved in performance marketing on creative, because a lot of people approach it from a brand side who've never done it before. I think the better looking creative is going to win. I've spent a lot of money on CG creatives and only had them beat by what I would call a janky creative that was built by one person that literally just had like images flashing like this. So I think it's a great way to know that like what you think is going to work is usually not the case. You have to try a huge range. And another approach we take is we try to basically iterate on 80% on top performers, because subtle little changes will make a big difference. And something that's difficult when you're running a big team too is trying to inspire the team to come up with their own choices and how to iterate on the creative. So we have this thing called lightning rounds, where literally the artist will just go and iterate on top performers, and we won't tell them how, right? And then 20% is on new concepts, because you need to constantly test new ideas.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Like, keep iterating the best creatives, but also if you want your ego crushed, try just disagreeing with the team and go ahead with your own weird ad strategy, and you will see that's not working. By that I mean there are so many times when you will get stuck in creative crisis and just stick to a single strategy. And my suggestion would be try using external agency, and they will produce the creatives that you will hate at first, but they a lot of times will be the best performing ones, and you will hate them, but they will be like 2-3 times better performing that you might be able to do for a while. So that's one of the things in ads, that don't trust the judgment, don't trust your own thing. And to prove that, once I've added my own credit card to the line for to the Google Ads line, and I lost 10K on that just by saying like, oh yeah, that's the best performing creative. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, I think the last tip, like, there's no real golden formula, but the first 3 seconds, right? I can't emphasize this enough, because like when you see TV commercials, it takes the whole ad for you to understand what's going on. But with mobile especially, and when it comes to performance marketing, people are so prone to swiping, and you really need to catch them at those first few moments.
So 3 seconds, what has our attention span come to? Okay.
Yeah, I think also a new thing with the UAC is that there are different distribution channels, like there are different creatives for text and display network and YouTube. And what's so great about UAC, if that creative might not work that well for particular channel, it will work much better on a different one. So that's one of the biggest advantages of UAC. It will actually find where the creative might perform better, and will deliver more of that creative over there. So that's a really cool feature that has launched since UAC.
Yeah, I think the collective machines, it's a worthy adversary.
Yeah.
So let's talk about localization. So you guys all serve ads on a very global basis. Are there any things you're noticing when you're trying to go into certain geographies or countries, like any strategies here to help?
So I'll answer this in a little bit of a reverse fashion. If you don't have localization, but you're looking for more reach, really English language targeting, that's how allowed us to really penetrate into different parts of the world while retaining the same creative strategy and the messaging and the product. So for instance, on Google, you can target between geo and language. And so we do a combination of those two, especially in, say, European geos, French campaigns, but we're serving all English users. So that's also another way to approach localization. To answer your question, Duke, I think the big thing is really how do you really resonate with the culture? So you want to capitalize on those holidays, for instance. And one of the biggest kind of revenue-generating days for us has become 11/11, which, if you heard this 5 years ago, you wouldn't have known what the significance of that day is. So really looking at which countries that have those opportunities, like Lunar New Year, for instance. I think that's another way to approach localization with content and features.
Japan's a big market for us. I think it's our 5th largest. And We have a woman on the UA team who speaks Japanese, grew up in Japan, and then we work with local agencies there, and that's the only way. Kind of going back to creative, like we get Japanese creatives back from the agencies, and we're like, what? And it just kills it there, because it's like you need someone who understands the culture. We would never be able to come up with those ourselves. So I think that's really important, especially for a country like Japan, or like how different the culture is. You really need to work with local agencies.
Yeah, one of the pro tips here might be go to your Google Play console and you will see which countries are trending. There are great tips in the console that will say this country is growing, and if you see the spike in charts and boost in downloads, push more ads into that, because the players really demand that. So you will need to localize it, because a lot of times you will just not get what this country is about. It's a lot of countries require a very special approach. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. And I just feel like these stores have really done a good job of democratizing access to developers everywhere, but also to users everywhere.
Yeah.
But the cultures are still intact, right? And I think it's easy to think it's one store now, same thing goes out everywhere. Maybe not so much.
That's a good point.
Okay, so moving over to monetization. So we all need to make money here. We need the industry to thrive. It's been doing really, really well. I think it's just such an interesting mix of art and science and how monetization has moved forward. So first question is just around data. What kinds of data are you using when you're thinking about monetization and making money for your apps?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start from that. So a little bit over 2 years ago, I think I was the strongest opponent of the ads in games. I was like, we didn't have any ads for the first 5 or 6 years within our games. Maybe we did some cross promotion, but that was it. Then we've started seeing complaints from our players that said, we can't earn any coins in your games. And they've started like putting 1 stars. And we're like, what is this all about? Why do we need to add those videos inside the games? So we added first a few, like get free coins, and then we started looking at how to optimize that. And the key data point here is figuring out how do you ensure that at least 60 to 70% of your daily audience will be able to press that magical button to either get extra turns, or maybe try a new special weapon inside the game or something like that. So this is our key kind of point for adoption of the ads within the game. And then the same, along with the reach, you have to figure out how many times a day these players can do that. Like 5, 10 rewarded videos per day might be a good result. But then the third point is how often will they do that across the lifespan of the user base. I mean, if 2 weeks down the road they stop pricing that, that probably means that you are just not providing a good enough value for users. Maybe you're still offering them 10 coins when the user needs at least 1,000 coins, and they will need to see 100 ads. That doesn't make any sense, so keep scaling up those rewards. So I think these are the 3 data points: the scale, the number of the daily opens of that, and just keep looking for how long will the users keep doing that.
That's great advice, especially the scaling of rewards. I think that's a challenge with a lot of games, and how do you appropriately integrate ads so that you're not cannibalizing, or like the economy's not suffering. We look at obviously like retention, RP, average revenue per install, based on if someone looked at an ad or not. But going back to like the economy, I think that's really important. So like you guys saw the case study with Panda Pop, and what we saw there was offering to watch a video to get a booster. A lot of our users were not like using boosters. They were not spending currency. I think a lot of free-to-play players are conditioned to basically hoard, especially in the more casual titles, and not spend. And so the rewarded ads were able to train people the value of the boosters. And what we saw is a slight cannibalization of our booster purchases initially. But as the ads were in a long enough timeline, we basically trained people the value of the boosters, and then booster purchases started going up. Similarly, in another game I worked in at WB, we basically could watch a video to keep fighting in a fighting game. So we had in-app purchases coming from the energy mechanic, was what we called it. And we saw clear cannibalization of this IEP. Basically, the ads were cannibalizing this little part of the economy, but it only made up 5% of our overall revenue. And the ad revenue accounted for about 15% just from this one placement. So the overall thing was additive. So I think you need to kind of understand like the impact the ad has on your economy, and is it training a user to perform a behavior that might be beneficial to the economy in the long run. And those are like tough things to do, but you just got to test them.
And you've talked a little bit about it, but I mean, rewarded ads, like I've heard the whole spectrum. You have to have enough users using them. Maybe it drives IEP up, maybe it drives IEP down, but overall revenue's up. But what is your take? We're a few years in as an industry. It looks to me to be a quite successful format, but do you think they work?
I think they do.
Yeah. Okay, that was rhetorical.
Yeah.
But what? So let's go deeper on that.
Yeah.
Like, where do they work really well?
Again, I think it comes back to understanding your economy. Like, if you're integrating ads, you really got to understand, and IEP is a big part of your business. You got to understand what's driving the demand for the IEP, right? What is the biggest thing driving that long-term demand? And you have to build ads around that, because there's going to be a lot of other areas in the economy where they're not core to the IEP purchases. And I think that's where ads go. Now, if you're predominantly ad-driven model, obviously you don't care about that. But it's really when you don't want to cannibalize IEP. And for us, what we've seen is that there's been almost no detriment to retention. And again, we're not aggressive with our ads, so I'm sure there is a moment where you would hit that kind of, you would start to impact retention negatively. But we haven't seen it, and it's only been additive. And then, because I oversee both sides, UA and ads, I think getting a 15 to 20 to 30% lift on LTV from ads, which is guaranteed, and a new feature is not guaranteed. So a lot of studios will basically say that this new feature will lift LTV 30%, and it rarely does. Ads is a guarantee. From the UA side, I think it's really important because it's something that helps us buy more users.
Okay, and Anatoly, you've tried the smart segmentation. You were one of our earliest beta partners to try it out. What do you think?
Yeah, we've had, we have 5 in-house studios, and they have 5 different shades or stages of skepticism towards ads. Some of them have been initial, like, nah, we're not going to do that at all. This was cannibalize our IEP sales, while the other studios might have been embracing those rewarded videos and interstitials from day one, and they have only seen the growth of the daily revenue by 30% on top of an in-apps. They have seen improvements in retention because players wouldn't churn for a reason that they couldn't actually proceed further. Now they're able to get that extra life or extra weapon. So for the most skeptical studios that we've got, the smart segmentation product is a great thing. Basically, it ensures that the highly valued users, those whales, potential whales, or the users that might potentially pay, they won't see any of those ads at all, like interstitials. So their gameplay experience will not be spoiled. But that just gave the studio extra assurance that they can integrate the ads without hurting any IAPs at all. So I think that's one of the good products within AdMob that is very safe to try. If you've never tried ads before, use smart segmentation, and you wouldn't hurt anyone with that. And then you will be able to embrace it across all the users.
Okay, and let's...
Yeah, I just want to go back, echo kind of Brian's note on the economy. Like a good example, like he said, with the boosts, a lot of the rewards should be, in my opinion, consumables, like that would be taken up on the spot. Whereas a bad example, in my opinion, would be if you offered them hard currency, which is the stuff that people actually pay real dollars to get. So the application, the reward value system, I think is also very important, just echoing Brian and Natalie.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So let's do a last, just a pass through quick. The future, mobile trends, any wisdom you want to impart here, educate us from your positions.
Sure. Excuse me. The more synchronous play on a global audience. I was in Myanmar this past summer, and the number of people on mobile phones playing games over there was incredible. That's only going to continue to grow, obviously. Higher fidelity gameplay enabled by better hardware, connectivity. Now, if we look from market-wise, we've all seen how big China has become, but now we're starting to look at other places like India. Now, it may not have high-value users right now, but what is that going to look like in 3 or 4 or 5 years? Because they're really investing heavily into technology as well. So I would think those are the two most exciting things for the future. And also new ad formats. I think that's also very interesting. Playables are still kind of new, but I think people are going to continue to push the envelope on how to get their brand message across or how to get people to install an application.
For us at Game Insight, on top of the great mobile connectivity across the world, now we can finally deliver things like mobile esports, like everyone around the world can play against each other and get ranked and participate in big tournaments. So for us, it's a really big trend that's enabled by high-speed connectivity going as far as India now, and we're really excited about it in 2019.
Yeah.
Those are awesome points. I would say, like we kind of already saw it with Google UAC, which is, a big data set that's basically running an algorithm that is spending across multiple channels based on the targets you give it. And I think that's going to keep going like levels and levels higher, so that UA at some point and budget optimization is going to be run with large machines, which makes creative more important. And again, I think I said it earlier, but it's going to, I think the marketing side is going to keep getting a level playing field. I think then it becomes on product to really figure out what signals to send back so that these machines can better do their jobs. And that's going to start baking into like early product development because it's so core to a product succeeding.
Great. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming in, sharing your insights. I want to thank everyone in the audience as well. This industry is just really moving a good direction. The global growth and what we're seeing, the amount of just intelligence that we're putting towards how to make these games better, how to earn money off of it, all of those things put together. I think everyone's doing a really phenomenal job. So thank you again to the panelists, and we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the conference.